so far we just have the coolest fans. Like, we don't have people that are jerks. We don't really have a lot of condescension. People are just like frank, but maybe, you know, there's a temperament that comes along with wanting to listen to our music. And I think that's given me, I've been able to tell myself, like, yeah, you can open up a little bit. Like, you're not going to be the kind of people that you want to read this stuff are going to be reading it. It's the people that you don't want to be reading it are probably not going to read it. So it's okay.
Will, Let the Light In is almost here as we're talking, exactly a month from now. Yep. That's exciting. It's your third album in our world. That means it's the number of the beast. It's the master of puppets. It's the album that is defining the band, the ultimate third album of a band. Do you feel that you wrote your defining album? But first, how are you?
I'm pretty good. That's an interesting question. A good way to frame it. I actually hadn't even thought of that, but yeah, I do feel like we kind of defined our sound. We really I feel like we found it this time in a really like big way.
Yeah. Where you guys are part of this, let's call it a golden age for post-metal, which is obviously a super broad term and can be interpreted in many, many different ways. But we're seeing bands, not just in the States, all over, break through with this sound, really, you know, touching emotions. Does it feel like a scene in a way, or is it too scattered for that for you?
That's interesting too. I mean, there's a scene, like we came up in a scene, like two of the guitar players were in Junius. I was in a band called Constance. Justin is now in Caspian. So we kind of came up in a scene through Boston and then kind of through touring in the US, and then that sort of grew into Europe as well. So I feel like there is a scene, but I don't know that how connected we are to like a lot of the younger bands maybe. But yeah, it feels like a good time to be in this kind of making this kind of music, like production wise and effects wise, and just like the technological side of things is so good right now that I think it was probably more of a challenge to make this stuff sound the way it sounds in our head 10 or 20 years ago. But now we're able to really like make it feel as big as we want it to feel, you know?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, no, for sure. Is it the fact that you mentioned it, like the fact that you guys are kind of, well, not only you play in different bands and whatnot, but you're also kind of scattered yourself a little bit.
Yeah, we are.
Does that, you know, in reality, how much is that of a hurdle, if you will, to, you said like, oh, I think we wrote the defining album of this band, finding an identity with people that are all over. Is that hard?
I don't think so. I mean, we all kind of come at it with our own individual biases, but I feel like because we've all done so much stuff that when it came time for this band, it you know, it's still taken a little bit to find the sound, but I feel like we had the nugget. We knew what we were trying to do,
right? And
just being able to achieve it, yeah, it took a little bit of time. I'm just thinking about being scattered. I think that in a way it's kind of been freeing because there's so much pressure when you get together with a band, especially as we get older, like, okay, guys, we have today and tomorrow, or we're going to get together once a week and you have to be present. You have to be focused. You have to have your best ideas and everybody's got to be on. Whereas we're able to sort of like, the way our process has evolved is like, I can come up with an idea. I can send it to the guys and they don't have to be there at 5 p.m. after working all day and like come up with their best ideas. They can take their time with it. They can work on it. And then the process can take a few months, but ultimately I feel like we all can bring our best because we're able to think on it and sort of like think about the bigger, broader picture rather than just be present in a room trying to like come up with a cool idea, you know?
Yeah. This album kind of feel the story I tell myself when I listen to the full album, which I had a chance obviously to do. Awesome. The story that I see unfolding in front of me is kind of like in the start of the album. I feel like I'm kind of in that moment in the metaphorical day, if you will, where, you know, between waking or, you know, being between dreaming and waking up, like kind of in that weird state. You kind of know what's going on, and it's very nice and cozy and warm. I'm not really out of bed yet. I'm not fully awake. Then we kind of, by the end of the first half of the album, that waking up seems to happen. We then, in some of the songs that have been released, some of the singles that show maybe like a nastier side of the album, a heavier.
Definitely.
I remember now that I'm awake what's wrong with everything, but then by the end of the album, I kind of feel like I'm coming to like some sort of terms or acceptance with it. So I feel like that's kind of like the journey I see throughout the album. Am I just projecting my own emotions here, or is there some truth to that flow?
I hadn't thought of it, framing it in the context of a single day, but that's for sure the journey of the album.
Yeah. This journey feels very like, introspective and personal, which is a bit of a break from what we saw before. There was more doom and gloom throughout your previous two albums, I would say. Now, and also maybe more macro vision. Now it's a little bit more introspective. I hope I don't offend you with this Walmart poster quote maybe, but is the message of this album really like, hey, you have to, real change has to come from ourselves, like be the change you want to see in this world? Is that really the message here?
Yeah, I mean, something we talked about a lot, is that the world is a dark place right now. It has been, obviously, but, sort of since the pandemic, it's been a lot of like, all right, guys, let's try to have at least a little glimmer of hope. Like we can be as heavy and gloomy and dark, whatever adjective you want to use to describe our music, but we really tried to make the point in every song. If it's just a note or a line, there just has to be some kind of glimmer of hope. And I think that's as much for us to stay sane as for the listener to sort of like welcome them. Because, there's a lot of heavy music out there and there's a lot of bands that do that really well. And we kind of made the conscious decision to like offer something a little more hopeful. It's still, again, it's dark and heavy music. Like we're not arguing that, but like, yeah, just giving people a way in and just kind of something to hold on to.
The two songs that have been released as singles in that journey that I mentioned earlier, like you said, okay, wasn't necessarily thinking of it as a one day, but there are like there's like this blissful ignorance maybe part to it, and then there's this descent into darkness part, and then there's ending on a hopeful note. Those are like kind of the three stages of this album.
Absolutely.
The two songs that have been released are both from that middle section where things seem to be a little more darker than the beginning and the end of the album. Was that like a lot of things go into choosing singles, and that's not always purely a band's choice? That like a lot of things can be involved with that, but for me it stands out that the two singles are from that middle section of the album. What's the rationale there?
To be honest, that was just sort of how the videos came together. Like, we try to plan everything as far out as we can, but sometimes people's schedules and stuff like that just kind of work a certain way, and then you just have to go with it. I don't think Give Blood I don't think our idea was for that to be the first single, but we're actually really happy that it is, because the way the video turned out, I still feel like that one has some hope in it. But yeah, it was really just a scheduling thing, if I'm being honest with you.
Here I am thinking of these grand, architects and meetings and plans. It's like that, no schedules. That's yeah.
I mean, we try to hold on to that stuff as much as we can. Like we're control freaks, but at a certain point, you just have to say, okay, this is how. Like these are the singles we want to come out, and we're just gonna cross our fingers and hope everything kind of comes out in a way that we're proud of, And so far, it's been great. I mean, it's the Nightmares is the song that we were kind of the most worried about from the album. People like getting it, just because it is really dark and dissonant. But yeah, the reaction's been really good, so we're happy with that. I mean, definitely the hopeful stuff is coming next. So
there you go. Good. With this approach of being more introspective and maybe quote unquote a little bit more real, to use a vague word to describe that.
Yeah, no, I like that.
Is that also then a little bit more scary than the previous two albums, where it's like for those that take the time to read and to really think about what you're channeling here, there's way less armor between you and the listener. So walk me through that experience for you, because that must have been a
Sure.
very different approach.
Yeah. Yeah. When we started the band, I sort of had an idea that it could sort of be like, uh, character's not the right word, but like there's a persona that you can put on to have like a dark, brooding band. And I sort of came at it from like thinking about like Pete Steele from Typo Negative, like just a larger than life kind of thing. I don't think I could ever be that kind of character, but that was sort of like in the back of my mind. And then we started touring a little bit, and then the pandemic happened, and we did the Awake EP. And that was, it's sort of broad, but there's some introspective stuff on there. And the feedback I got from that while we were out on tour, just people saying like how much those songs mean to them, kind of gave me a little bit of bravery to be like, okay, like maybe being dark and thoughtful and introspective is like, there's space in the world for people to want to understand that and hear it. And I've said this before, but like so far we just have the coolest fans. Like we don't have people that are jerks. We don't really have a lot of condescension. People are just like frank, but maybe, it's like there's a temperament that comes along with wanting to listen to our music. And I think that's given me, I've been able to tell myself like, yeah, you can open up a little bit. Like you're not going to be the kind of people that you want to read this stuff are going to be reading it. It's the people that you don't want to be reading it are probably not going to read it. So it's okay. You know what I'm saying? So we'll see how it goes. It's still early days of that, but like so far so good. I'm happy to put a little bit more of myself into this stuff.
Are you then also already contemplating, or maybe even already writing for what's next? And like, how has that influenced that reaction to being more open? How do you see that being influencing on what you're doing now?
So for this record, we actually have had close to 2 albums worth of material that we sort of when we really started recording drums and like getting serious about like deciding what was going to be on the album, we decided that there were 2 different buckets of songs. So to your point, like we wanted to make something that felt like a journey, and we filled in the blanks in that bucket to make it feel like a journey. And then we have, I'd say probably another 10 or so songs that we have to put into the next record. And there'll probably be some more writing that kind of like makes the next journey. So usually I don't really start with lyrics. Lyrics kind of come later. I'll write all the vocal melodies and have sort of like touchstone points that I have in mind. And then I kind of fill in the blanks with what I'm feeling at the time. But I mean, it seems like it would be another more introspective record. But again, if there's like a backlash and we get a bunch of shit for the most positive songs coming up next, maybe I won't be so forthcoming.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not only maybe a challenge to be so forthcoming on record, but now you can be forthcoming, on stage night after night, night after night, which can be, a bit of a traumatic experience as well. I'm sure you're going to come not only to Canada, but obviously you're touring US as well with Earthside. It's a really cool package. Their last album was also really nice and very different than you guys, but very similar in approach maybe, or mentality. I
think it's going to be a good lineup for sure.
It's a great combo. Yeah. So what can we, given that this album is different than the previous 2 albums, there's no denying that. I mean, sure, you didn't go from like a jazz to country, but there is an evolution. You've called this album the band's defining album. You are more open in your approach. Does that mean that we should expect predominantly or maybe only music from the last album? What can we expect from the show?
Before we move past it, I want to share kind of a funny thing, and then we'll jump to this. So you're talking about like the introspective and sharing that in front of an audience. We just moved, so like my studio setup isn't done yet, so I'm just in a basement right now practicing. And I have a 6-year-old daughter who likes to sneak down and listen to me sing, and I'm not playing through amps or anything. I just have my ears in while I'm practicing. So she's literally just hearing me belt out falsettos about like emotions and stuff like that. It's been like, I think it's been a good warm up to be like, okay, if I can do this in front of my daughter, I can do this in front of 100 or 200 people with dark lights. It'll be okay. And then as far as what's coming up in the set list, I mean, you know, as someone who goes and sees bands, and like I appreciate the band's new record, but I also want to hear the songs that I like already. And I want to be, you know, if I'm shelling out 20 or 40 or 60 or $100, I want to like get the experience I want. And I've been doing this long enough to know that like, just being a selfish dick about it isn't going to earn you any fans. So we always try to like do a good balance of what keeps us excited and what's going to make people who already like us happy. And I think there's also something to be said about like, you know, we played a lot of these songs so much that they're like, there's muscle memory involved. So like, we know we can play those songs really well, and that's going to make us more comfortable when it comes to the new songs. So yeah, we're trying, I think there's 3, maybe 4 from the new album, you know, 1 from the first album, a couple from Shape, and then the 2 songs from the Awake EP.
Yeah. Awesome.
So we try to find a good mix that makes everybody happy.
Now, being a father myself, I have a 2-year-old son at this point.
Oh, nice. You getting any sleep?
Yeah. He's a good sleeper. He's a good sleeper. Good. He's been 7:30 to 7 for a long time.
Wow, which is good. Nice. That's awesome.
But I am obviously very interested in that experience with your daughter. Does she? Because 6-year-old, like the vocabulary of a 6-year-old is pretty good already.
It's pretty good.
So it's not that, you know, when you are singing in front of her, that all of that is gibberish to her.
Right.
How is she reacting to it? Can she place everything? Is she concerned about her dad?
I don't think so. I think it's more just kind of intrigued. Like she's just really starting to like listen to music. Like when I just left her, she's got her headphones on. She's listening to music on her little, you know, music player. I think it's more just like, oh, cool, music. And she's not paying that close attention, I don't think. It's good. Yeah, I'm curious how that conversation is going to go when she gets a little bit older. But I think that she understands that there's a certain amount of separation between, you know, reality and how I work out emotions in music, I think. And I think I'll figure out how to explain that to her, I hope.
There's, I forget right now who said it, but there is this wonderful quote out there that says, you don't inherit your name from your parents, you borrow it from your kids. Is how much of an influence has being a dad on how the music of the band has evolved? Like do you see that when you take a step back? The fact that you 100%. Are daring to be more personal and talk about maybe what's really important. Is that just a direct relationship there?
It must be, yeah.
Does it concern you at times?
No, I don't think so. Like it helps me be more thoughtful. It helps me, like, I mean, I was definitely a much more, I try to be a relatively silly person, but like there was more doom and gloom before I had a daughter. And now it's more like, okay, man, like the song Let the Light In is literally just came from like during the pandemic, going into her room, waking her up in the morning, you know, like everything was shut down. She didn't have daycare. It was just me and her all day. And it just became this like mantra of like, I open the shades. Okay, we're let the light in through the windows, try to like bask in the morning a little bit, and then turn around and try to be a good dad. So I feel like that kind of is like become the bedrock of all of it. You know what I mean? I don't know what kind of music I'd be making. I don't know that it would be that different, but probably be a little bit less thoughtful. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Are you more critical of yourself as well? Like, do you set new standards?
Much less critical.
Interesting.
Yeah. I find that the self-criticism, I don't want to pass that shit on to her. Like I see that I got a lot of that from my parents, and I don't want her to be in her head stuck thinking about things that ultimately don't matter. Like, so it's helped me think less about that sort of stuff and just more like, again, focused on myself, my own introspection, and like what I can bring to the table with her, to the table with music, to the table with like, you know, people connecting hopefully the music that we're making, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Well, a lot of people are going to connect with that music when the album comes out, when you're touring.
Hope so, man. Thank you.
You'll be here in Toronto in a few weeks.
Very excited.
Which is exciting.
Yeah, I love it.
So we can't wait to have you. Let's hope that you know, our two nations don't go down a downward spiral again like the last few weeks, so that we
Yeah.
still, you know, can have you guys over,
Oh my
which
God.
I'm sure won't be a problem.
I hope not.
You might want to just stay here.
Yeah. Not a
But
bad idea.
Will, it was a pleasure talking to you. Hope you don't mind me going a little bit more on the personal route here, but I appreciate all the insights that you gave us, not only about the album, but about Fatherhood as well. I very much appreciate that. I'm
Yeah, this is
excited for
super fun.
everybody to listen to this full album and discover what's coming, all the hopeful stuff that they haven't heard yet, outside of the two singles released. Thank you so much for your time today, and I hope to see you on the stage soon.
Yeah, thank you.
You are awesome for watching this video. Click right here to see more content like it and subscribe to the channel.